So here's a wild thought for you. What if your paycheck isn't actually income in the way you've always been told? Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating and, yeah, pretty unconventional argument that gets right to the heart of how we think about our work, our money, and our taxes. Let's jump in. Here's the game plan. We're going to start with a really provocative claim. Then we'll dig into the legal argument they build around it. After that, we'll see how that argument holds up under a microscope. And finally, we'll see what's left, a much more refined and honestly, a pretty surprising new way of looking at things. All right, let's get right to it. We're starting with an idea that, if it were true, would pretty much flip everything we know about taxable income on its head. Okay, think about this for a second. The idea is actually super simple. It says your labor is your property. So when you go to work, you're not gaining anything new. You're just swapping one piece of property, your time and skill, for another piece of property, money. And if it's an even trade, well, there's no profit, no gain. And if there's no gain, what is there to tax? So how on earth do you even begin to build a case for something that sounds so radical? Well, let's look at the legal and constitutional nuts and bolts they use for this lawful operator argument. The whole thing really stands on this one core idea. Your labor isn't just something you do, it's something you own. It's a constitutionally protected property interest, just like your house or your car. It has economic value, and it belongs to you. And here's the next piece of the puzzle. It comes from a very specific Supreme Court case that defined income as an undeniable accession to wealth. Now, those words are absolutely key. The argument hinges on that exact phrase, saying, look, if I'm just swapping my labor property for money property of the same value, where's the accession to wealth? It's a swap, not a gain. So this is how the logic flows, step by step. 1. You own your labor. 2. You trade it for an equal amount of money. 3. That means there's no gain. 4. No gain means no taxable income. And the final crucial step in this line of thinking is that you then have to formally challenge the IRS's default assumption that your wages are automatically income. Now, this isn't just some abstract legal theory. It's actually paired with a very specific accounting strategy. The idea is you literally treat your labor like a financial asset on your own general ledger. You create a paper trail to back up your claim that the money you get isn't a gain, but simply a return of your property's value. Okay, time for a hard pivot. An argument can sound perfectly logical on its own, but the real test is, how does it hold up when you put it under the bright lights of mainstream legal and accounting rules? And this right here is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The logic seems to follow a path, but is that a path that the IRS or the courts will actually recognize? And here's the reality check, plain and simple. A critical review basically says, nice try, but no. You can't just change the fundamental nature of something by how you write it down on your own books. It's kind of like writing, this napkin is a $100 bill on a napkin. It doesn't actually make it legal tender. The established rules are very, very clear on what counts as payment. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of why this original argument hits a brick wall. First, it messes up the accounting rules. It treats a receivable, which is basically just an IOU for your work, as if it's a cash equivalent, like actual money. It's not. Second, you can't create a tax overpayment with a simple journal entry. An overpayment only happens when you've sent the government actual cash that you didn't owe. But wait, the story doesn't end there. This is where it gets really interesting, because that harsh criticism doesn't just kill the idea. It forces it to evolve into something much smarter, more precise, and frankly, legally defensible. And this slide really shows the massive pivot. You see the shift? The whole strategy changes. Forget about trying to pay your taxes with some self-created asset. The new, refined position is way more subtle. It's about using accounting not to pay the tax, but to prove what was never taxable income in the first place, and to identify where you've already overpaid in cold, hard cash. So this new approach is much more buttoned up. It completely plays by the established rules. It admits, yep, a ledger entry doesn't pay a tax bill. Instead, the only reason for the detailed bookkeeping is to create a rock-solid auditable record. A record that you can then use to legally file for refunds of actual cash that was taken out of your paycheck when it shouldn't have been. Okay, so after all that, after the argument and the counter-argument and the refinement, what can a person actually do? What's the practical takeaway here? It really boils down to a methodical and, frankly, kind of boring administrative process. This isn't some crazy scheme. It's about using standard IRS forms, backed up by your own meticulous, GAAP-compliant accounting to amend your past tax returns and claim a refund for money that was incorrectly taken. Let's just put this side by side one last time to make it crystal clear. On the left, you have the fringe theory that got shot down. But on the right, you have a totally lawful, powerful accounting strategy. The goal is no longer about trying to invent a loophole. It's about using the established principles of accounting to prove your correct financial reality and make sure you only pay what you lawfully owe.
And that really leaves us with a provocative question to chew on, doesn't it? We've gone on this whole journey from a really radical claim to a very disciplined accounting practice. And it suggests that the very same tools of financial accuracy that the biggest corporations in the world use to get their books right could also be used by you. If it's all about ensuring fairness and correctness for them, well, why not for you too? Thanks for watching.